Hello, Resonate. My name is Brian Fry. I'm an owner with a Pullman site here in Pullman, Washington. Excited to be with you today. I'm different from most of the people that you're going to be hearing from on a weekly basis at Resonate in the sense of I'm not a site pastor or a full-time ministry guy. I actually have a job, a full-time gig at a local company here in Pullman, at an engineering company doing a program management role. So I work with learning and leader development and culture there. So really excited to be here with you today. I have worn a coat to hide my biceps. I don't want to be compared to Stephen Ward, but really excited to be with you guys in the process. My job today is to give the third of 4 sermons in the series, this 9 to 5 series. So today I'm going to be talking about the idea of mission and work and how they fit together. I think I got asked to do this sermon candidly because I'm the only guy who's doing this full-time gig, being in the marketplace, being in the workplace. So what I'd really like to do is just take a little bit of time to speak with you about this idea of work being mission, or the idea that your work is the mission. So let me explain what I mean by that, because you could take it in a couple different ways. I really have kind of a double entendre going with it. The first idea is that no matter what role that you're in, what job that you're in, that is the mission field that God has given you. All of us in our jobs, in our educational process in schools, whether we're doing farming, we're doing elementary education, we're a stay-at-home mom, we're leading a business, we sell insurance, all of those roles for each one of us, that is our mission field. So wherever you are, whatever you're doing, you're in a mission field in that time. College student, high school student, elementary, any place there, you are in your mission field. A second idea, and this idea of your work is your mission, is the reality that as believers, as those who are following Christ, we are on a lifelong mission. Part of our job, part of our role in this lifetime is to share the gospel with other people and help them come to a saving knowledge of Christ, and then to grow in their relationship with Christ as well. So hear this as we're starting, right? There's this idea first that your workplace, that is your mission, no matter where you are, no matter what you're doing. And also that as a part of the body of Christ, as we're living this life, we have a mission in this lifetime to impact the world around us with the gospel. So as we focus on this discussion today, this 9 to 5 idea, I've got 3 questions that I'd like to ask and then I would like to answer with you. So that's what we'll do. I'll just work through these 3 questions, give you a little context, give you a little thought along the way. So if you're taking notes, you'll see this on the bottom of the screen here. But as we work through here, the 3 questions I'm going to seek first to ask and then to answer. So the first question is this: how much does God actually tell us about work? Like when you read the Bible, when you're studying the Bible, how much work is in there? How much focus is in this book? Largely a spiritual document. A lot of people view it that way, that it's only good for certain parts of their lives. But how much really does the Bible talk about our work lives, our 9 to 5s, if you will? Second question is, if you want to serve God fully, do you have to do a church ministry job? And I know for most of you, you're like, that may not be a really important question. That seems like it's kind of superfluous. I really don't care about it. But I think some of you are likely thinking that question through right now. If I really want to serve God fully, do I have to do a church ministry job in a full-time kind of way? And here's my third question. How do we do ministry if we're working a 40? Like if we're working a full-time job, we're trying to make money, provide for our family. We want to do all those things that we need to do just as a human being who lives on the planet. How do we, while we have all kinds of responsibilities as leaders, adults, as parents, as just people functioning in the world, how do we fit ministry into that space? So those are the 3 questions that I've asked and I'll seek to answer along the way today. So the first question, that idea of how much does God tell us about work as we read the Bible? Well, as you think about the Old Testament, you see individuals like Joseph, individuals like Daniel, in roles and positions of government. They're leading there. But throughout the Old Testament, you're seeing people in different working capacities, different roles, some positive roles, some negative roles. But the Bible shows us work throughout. some people make the mistake of just looking at Old Testament, just looking at the whole Bible and saying, well, we can pull out leadership principles, we can pull out leadership ideas, and those should influence our work. That's really where the Bible stops when it comes to thinking about how believers, how Christ followers, how God followers do work, do life, do ministry together. But the reality is you study the scriptures, the more you'll see that God is communicating to us regularly about what work looks like and how to do work. I looked at a little bit of commentary on what work looks like in the Bible. Looked at David Jones in his book Every Good Thing, and his research demonstrates how Bible scholars together, they'll highlight the concept, or they look at the scriptures, and the estimate is about 800 times in Old and New Testament combines that the Bible is talking about, referring to, demonstrating aspects of work in it. So that is the whole body of work. But then when you look at Jesus's life and you think about this idea of work, you think about this idea of mission, you realize that Jesus was probably about 12 years old when he started working. That would have been common for his time, for that time in which he lived. He didn't start his ministry until he was 30 years old. So in all that time, that 18-year window, it's very likely that Jesus was about the family business. We see allusions to that as we read the scriptures. His father was a carpenter, a blue-collar tradesman type. So it's likely as we look at Jesus's life that he is out working. He knows what it's like to deal with customers. He knows what it's like to get up early, to stay up late, to meet the demands, meet the needs of those around him. So as you look at Jesus's life, he is exposed to work. Everything that he's doing, he's showing that he's got experience and background in the working space. And then as you think about not only Jesus, but then you think about the disciples, the people who ran around with him, all of them would have had jobs on some level before they began to follow him. And then even after they began following him, it's likely that they continued their work along the way. So when you think about ministry and you think about work, the disciples are an example of individuals who were doing work and doing ministry simultaneously. You think about an individual like Peter, he's a fisherman. You think about an individual like Matthew, who's a tax collector in the process. And the reality is all of those disciples, the context that they were learning and growing and doing ministry was while they were working. And you could say, well, they all followed Jesus, right? They left their boats, they left what they were doing, and Jesus said, come follow me. And in some cases they left, but that leaving was somewhat momentary. They were still doing work and still doing activity along the way. But then as you look at Jesus's stories too, we see over and over again as he's teaching the parables that Jesus is talking about aspects of business. He's talking about sowing and reaping and buying and selling and fishing and shepherding and farming and investing in a slew of other marketplace motifs. So you see, as you continue to go deeper into the scriptures and as you continue to look more and more at Jesus' life, the idea of doing business or the idea of going to work, it's really not so separate and distinct. And then if you think about Paul, the guy who's responsible for writing the most letters in the New Testament, the most books in the New Testament, what do you see with him? Well, here's a guy who's from the academy. He's theologically trained. He's been in academic circles. And then he leaves that role to go on a journeyman type position where he's going around and he's building tents. He's an REI kind of guy. He's building tents for people as he's doing ministry along the way. So the reality is, the more time that you look at scripture, the more that you study it, the more that you're going to see that God's mission and work, they're not separate things. In reality, God's mission and work are combined together. Our work, God's mission, they're not separate. They're not distinct from each other. In fact, the more that you study the Bible, the more that you look at it, the more you realize that they're simply interwoven together. And for those of you who are running businesses, for those of you who are deep into marketplace world right now, I know sometimes it can feel like you're the only believer in that space. You're the only Christian there. And the thing that I encourage you to do is use a little bit of Google Fu, check things out, start looking. There's a growing body of work and videos and podcasts to help you see just how closely, as you read scriptures and as you see what's going on in the Bible, that work and ministry, they're aligned together. So when you look at the Bible, and you study the Bible, what you're going to find is God's activity is strong in the workplace. And it only is going to continue as we move into the future. Here's a second question. What if I want to serve God fully? Do I have to do a ministry kind of job? Do I have to be in a full-time vocational ministry place? So I'd like to take you back 25 years ago to the year 1997. There was this new conference that had come on the scene. It was called Passion. If you've ever heard of Passion music, names like Chris Tomlin, Louis Giglio, John Piper. This was the first big moment that they were together where they were calling college students together, really from around the world, but specifically in the state of Texas. Lots and lots of people came together. It really was a seminal moment, a building moment for Christianity, moving into the 90s or moving into the 2000s and beyond. All kinds of leaders, church planters, influencers today were at that gathering, that conference for college students in 1997. While we were there, though I had been a growing Christian, I've been reading my Bible, I've been sharing the gospel, I was involved in collegiate ministry, I was leading people. Something happened to me in that space. And I sensed God calling me to give my whole life to whatever he would ask me to do. I sensed a moment where I felt like God was calling me to his mission in a significant way that had been different than anything that I had thought about or I had heard about before. So for those of you who can remember back to your college years or those who are in your college years now, you know how many decisions you're making about life and about vocation and what you do with that time. I was in that space at 21 years old. I had had a dream to be a college professor, to have a business on the side. And here I was in this space where I sensed God calling me to do something more, something different, to step into a deeper level of obedience with him. And honestly, I entered into a place of confusion and a place of struggle because I perceived that God's calling to me was to leave those things that I was good at, those things that I enjoy, those things that I was passionate about, to go and do a ministry thing that I really didn't understand or in some ways that I really didn't want to do. I didn't think that being a pastor was my thing. I didn't want to lead church music in front of the congregation. I didn't really want to be a missionary and going overseas. And I didn't want to be a youth minister for sure. There were a lot of things that I thought I would have to do, that I would have to separate from those things that I love to do. And honestly, that in that moment of struggle, I tried to figure out, okay, God, what is it that you're asking me to do? I want to follow you. I want to be obedient to you. I want to grow in my relationship with you, but I don't know how this works out. So if you've been in this spot or you're in this spot now, I want you to listen really carefully to what happens next. In that moment, after I'd had an encounter with God, what I really needed to do was press in deeper and follow and listen to what God was asking and what he was directing me to do. But instead, I looked around me and I thought, okay, if I'm going to do this clergy thing, if I'm going to be in this ministry space, then I need to do the things that ministry people do. So I began to equate my fellowship and my obedience to God with the idea that if I'm going to be obedient, if I'm going to be a godly person, then I need to go into the ministry full time. In fact, I would ask people around me, I feel like God's asking me to do something more. What should I do? And not to no negativity towards those who would give me advice. He said, well, if you feel like God's calling you, if you feel like God's asking you to do more, then you need to go to seminary and you need to go into ministry full time. And what happened in that moment, what happened in that time of decision is I created a false dichotomy, or I bought into a false dichotomy. I bought into a construct that said that if you want to follow God, you either go the sacred route and become more holy, you go into ministry, or you disobey God and you go into a secular space, you go into the work world. Again, I know at the beginning I said, some of you, this is not going to make any difference. You're going to think it's not a big deal. But for some of you, I think you're probably struggling with this question. Maybe you're in your 20s, or maybe in your 30s, maybe even 40s. You're looking at what you do with the rest of your life. If I could encourage you in 1 way, here's the way that I would encourage you. What's more important than the constructs or the dichotomies or figuring out, hey, is it a secular or is it a sacred kind of thing? What's most important is you walking in an obedient relationship with Jesus. You don't need to be concerned about what everybody is saying, but if you're going to follow Jesus, if you're going to do this, if you're going to do an obedient life, that you've got to do this job, you've got to do things this way. The reality is that what God is calling you to is to leverage your life in relationship with Him towards seeing other people come to know Christ. In the where that you do that, in the how that you do that, it's going to look different from all of us. But if somebody comes up to you and says, hey, in order to follow God, you must do this job. You must do this vocation. I just want you to lovingly encourage them and say, no, what's most important is that I'm in an obedient relationship with God. And that I'm using the skills and the abilities that He's given me to do what He's called me to do. And calling looks different from person to person. I often think back to that moment and the choice to go to seminary and the choice to go into ministry. And honestly, it's still a struggle space for me. And my wife and I will talk about this sometime. And even how I'm processing, even now 25 years later, I'm still trying to understand what the implications of those decisions were for me. But I think most important, here's what I've thought through. How could I have missed that moment in creating this dichotomy and saying, is this a secular thing? Is this a sacred thing or a secular thing? When if I had just spent more time looking at Jesus's life and Paul's life, I would realize that those two things don't have to be distinct from one another. In reality, it's not at all about the construct. It's not all about the separation of the two. It's, again, very much about the relationship. So here's what I want you to hear me say. We'll move forward with this. The construct that was in my thinking was that in order to follow God and to please God and do things the right way and to do it all the way, I had to do a specific job in a specific way, instead of relying on my relationship with God to guide my decision about vocation and work. I basically deferred to the Christian culture and the church model around me to know what I was supposed to do with my job. But if I'd have just known, if someone would have come alongside me and said, Brian, those two things are not independent of one another. It's not an issue of sacred or secular. Your life with God's engagement in it, Him being within you, the Spirit guiding you, it brings a sacredness to all the work of your life, no matter where you are, no matter what you're doing. I remember my grandpa, Bud McAfee, when he came back from World War II, he made a decision not to take something called the GI Bill. For those of you who are more historically minded, you think a lot about history, you know that the GI Bill changed the trajectory of North America. People who had gone overseas, who had fought in wars, who had been in the different theaters of war, as they came back and they began to take their knowledge of the world, their much more globalized view, the United States government was trying to figure out what to do with all these folks. So the government set up a bill, a package, so that anybody who was coming back from the military could take payment for university. So basically the government would pay for everybody to take college classes to get their degree. My grandfather came back and he didn't do that. And I said to him as he aged, as we were talking, Grandpa, you sent all of your kids, you mandated your children go to college. You were involved in this 4-H program. You gave your life to helping other people move forward. Why didn't you take the GI Bill? Like, how could you know so much and have missed that piece? Now, again, this is in conversation. We're dialoguing back and forth. And here's what he said to me. He said, Brian, you got to realize that I didn't have a dad in the picture with me. Most of my family, they were struggling with alcohol, and I didn't have those people in my life to guide me and to tell me, hey, you should do this thing. So, Brian, I didn't take it. I didn't do it because no one was there to tell me. So when it comes to this question of vocation, I feel like no one was there to tell me, hey, you don't have to separate sacred and secular. And then even as we're in this minute now, I don't miss the fact that it probably would be helpful for you to hear. It would be a good moment for someone to tell you, no matter what you do job-wise, you can follow God, be obedient to God, be walking in a deep relationship with Him, and leverage that work, leverage your job, leverage your skill sets to impact the world around you. Okay, so just don't miss that. So as we look at scripture, as we look at Matthew 28, 18 through 20, just read along with me again. This will be down the bottom of the screen. And Jesus came and said to them, all authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me. Go, therefore, and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and the Son and of the Holy Spirit, teaching them to observe all that I have commanded you. And behold, I am with you always to the end of the age. Look at verse 19 there for just a moment. And I just want you to focus on the word go. And how do you see that word? What does that mean? I think so many of us read that passage or read this passage and see that word and immediately assume, I can't stay where I'm at. I've got to go to these other places. And surely at the time of writing in the New Testament, there was this world around, so many places around the globe that had not heard the gospel, had not had exposure to the gospel. But now as we're 2,000 years later down the road, many places around the world, they've seen, heard, had exposure to the gospel. Surely there are still places that have not heard about Jesus. But now we live in this globalized context where sometimes you can go to work or you can go to school and you can encounter people from all over the globe. So as you read this, I think it's important to realize that the going here is as you are going along your way. So as you go into your classroom, as you go into the marketplace, as you go into schools, as you go into government, as you go into business, wherever those places are, the opportunity awaits for you to tell people around you, whatever that job place looks like, about Jesus. And then the second passage I'd like you to look at, I'm going to look at Colossians 3:17 and then verses 23 through 24. Here's the idea I want you to see. That whatever you do, by doing your best in that process, you are giving glory to God. This is what He would ask us to do. So whatever the role is, whatever the job, whatever the vocation. So starting with verse 17 and following. And whatever you do in word or deed, do everything in the name of the Lord Jesus, giving thanks to God the Father through Him. Again, whatever you do, work heartily, as for the Lord and not for men, knowing that from the Lord you will receive the inheritance as your reward. You are serving the Lord Christ. So that question, if you want to serve God fully, do you have to have a church ministry job? The answer is no. You can be a church planter. You can be on a church planting team. You can raise your support, and that's good, and those are positive things. But you can go and start a business. You can teach in a classroom. You can work in the government. You can sell insurance. You can do whatever you want to do. And as long as you're in deep relationship with God and you're leveraging your life for the gospel, you're in a good place. You're in a healthy spot. Question number 3, how do I do ministry if I work a 40-hour-a-week job? So you say, okay, Brian, let's say that I buy into this idea that ministry and mission isn't just for pastors or Resonate staff or missionaries. Let's say that I do believe that God wants me to do ministry in my workplace and through my work. Well, how do I do that? Let me give you a simple way to think about it, and then let me just give you 6 habits to practice. So here's the way to look at it. If you will just view the places that you are and the people that are in them as your mission and your mission field, you're gold. So again, let me say that so you're hearing me. Wherever you are going, wherever you are living, the places that you go on a regular basis and the people that you find there, that's your mission field. So as you're working a 40-hour-a-week job, as you're doing class right now, as you're doing night school, whatever you're doing, those people in that place right then, right there, the people around you right now, they are your mission field. So businesses, ball teams, clubs, study groups, all of them, those are your mission field. And then let me give you the 6 practices. And this is hopefully the 6 habits. And hopefully this is the most clear and direct way that I can give you information on stuff that I'm practicing, stuff that our family's doing. You heard me say, I think at the beginning, that a few years ago, my wife and I, our family, we moved to Pullman. The backstory on that is I've been doing college ministry on the local and then the state and the national level for about 20 years. And we had realized that in order for churches to be continued, to plant churches at the pace that we needed to continue on with the vision of 21 by 21 and so forth, that we would need to see more people not only doing vocational ministry, but also doing ministry in their vocations. So Heidi and I moved with our boys out here. We left full-time ministry world and then moved into a place where we took on, I would say secular jobs, but I've been trying to keep away from that earlier. We took on these jobs where we're in the marketplace. So then we have to figure out, okay, how do we take these 40-hour or 45-hour or 50-hour week jobs and continue to do ministry and continue to impact people while we're doing that, while we're doing this work? I mean, how do you make these things happen? Here are 6 habits that I've got for you. I've taken some of these from Michael Frost, but I can tell you these are all practices that we're doing as a family. We're seeking to do these in a consistent way. The first recommendation I'd have for you, and again, we're practicing this, is eating with people. It's the idea of eating when you're at school with people, sitting down with other people around your table. It's the idea of when you're at work, doing lunches with people, simply to build relationship with them, to get to know them, bringing people into your world. When you look at Jesus's life, he seems to be always doing meals with folks, or making meals for folks, or creating meals for folks. And he's using that meal time as a way to connect with people. So let me give those to you again. The first one was eat with people. The second one here, this is the idea of sharing stories. So when you think about how Jesus did his ministry, throughout his ministry, he doesn't jump up in front of groups of people and tell really, really, really long sermons, deliver those in an extended way. And I know some of you are saying, hey, Brian, I'm looking at the clock here. You've already not done what Jesus was his model. You're not following his example. But what Jesus would do is he would tell stories. And if you think about our world around us today, those ideas that tend to stick, whether we're talking about commercials, or we're talking about Netflix, talking about stories, we're talking about songs, the power of story is incredibly potent. So when you are with people, if you'll spend time telling stories about what's going on in your life, it creates this place of connectivity. But if you'll ask them about their stories, or you'll listen to their stories, and when they share their stories, you'll bring them the things that they've shared about, the experiences that they've had, you'll bring those up in other situations. You'll find yourself connecting with people in a more significant way. So again, this idea of how do we connect with people in the workplace? First, you eat meals with them. Second, you share stories with them. And let me give you a really tangible example of how we did this in my workplace. When I came into my job a couple years ago, the word on the street in our department was our culture wasn't where we wanted it to be. There was it was just kind of a cloudy gray sky over our department. And of course, in that space, I'm thinking, how do I leverage the gospel, leverage my experience, my background, to see other people around me experience the gospel, see and understand the gospel? So what we did on Friday afternoons for 30 minutes via Microsoft Teams is we would do what we called Friday Five. And we worked systematically through every person in the department while we were on our weekly stand-up meeting. We just asked 5 questions about everybody on our team. So 1 week it was my boss, 1 week somebody on my team, and we worked through all 25 of us on the team. And here's what happened as we ask, hey, tell us your background. Where are you from? Tell us something you're passionate about. Tell us something that you would wish that everybody around the room knew about you, but that you didn't have to tell them. Tell us about something that you're really, really proud of. Tell us about your greatest accomplishments so far in your job. And we would do these kind of questions. Some of these questions are a little bit more intimate. Some of them are a little bit more humorous. But simply by bringing out people's stories, we were able to create a higher level of trust, a higher level of connection. And then over time, as you share those stories, as you create remembrance around those stories, you create community there. So again, just the idea of bringing out people's stories, learning their stories. The third habit that you can get into is the idea of bringing people into your home. In our world today, the home seems to be this kind of sacred space, a place of respite, a place of retreat. People get done with their work, they do their hard stuff, they want to leave that behind, and then they want to go into their sacred space, their home space. And what happens is work world and home world become really, really distinct. Well, something pretty magical, something not magical in an inappropriate way, something beautiful happens. Let's go that way. Something really beautiful happens when you bring somebody from your work world into your home world. People are able to see you, experience you. If you have kids, they see what your kids are like. They get to interact there. It causes humor around there. If you share a meal together, there's a level of intimacy and connection that takes place. All kinds of people. Within our first year of being in Pullman, we had 100 different people within our house. And for some of you, I know that if your last name is Dahl, it's probably that number seems really low because it's been a lot higher. But for us, it was a pretty significant thing, new people in the community. But what we found is, as we did that, more and more people said, hey, this is fun. I just really get to know you. We had greater levels of connections with folks just by bringing them into our home and into our orbit there. It's a highly connective place. So again, first thing, eat meals with people. Second thing, figure out ways to share stories, to learn their stories. Third thing, get them into your house. Invite people in to that space that in our world today, it doesn't seem very it doesn't seem very normal. So it automatically becomes a special and intimate thing when they come hang out with you. Here's the fourth thing: is ask questions and listen. So many people they want to be known and they want to have connections, but maybe they don't know how to go about that process well. Maybe they're new in your work, in your company. They've moved from a place to another place. They're in a new community, a new job, a new space. They're just trying to figure out their lives. If you come alongside them and ask them, hey, how are you doing? What's going on? Just that act of asking about them and then listening creates a higher level of connection with them. This is doing ministry with people. You think about Jesus and the woman at the well. Jesus is using that tool, right? He's asking people questions along the way. As he's talking with his disciples, he's asking them questions to help them learn and grow. So asking and listening for responses. If you want to do ministry around you, it's a really, really potent way to do that. I'll give you a fifth one, and then I'm going to give you the sixth. And the sixth is mandatory, right? You can do the other five, and you can practice one or just two of those habits, but the sixth one is the mandatory habit. So it's any one of those first five and then that last one together. The fifth thing is help develop people around you. Help them grow in their learning. I was going to say nerding. Their learning and their insight, right? Help people become more understanding of the world around them. That seems weird at first, right? Because you're like, hey, I'm not going to be that guy that says, hey, let me teach you something. But I'm not really arguing for a direct, doing that in a direct fashion. It's helping people learn and grow and see things new as you're walking alongside of them. So earlier today, one of the people that is on a team that I work on, he was presenting to higher level leaders within our organizations. First time that he had done that and wanted to be successful at it. So I had known, because I had walked through those paths before, that to do so successfully, you don't walk in a room and just give a presentation within our organization. It's much more of a conversational approach. So ahead of time, I said, hey, instead of walking in there and expecting to talk for 10 or 15 minutes and then allowing the room to speak to you, spend time with them conversing around it. Be ready to be interrupted along the way. So I instructed him. I showed him, hey, you do this thing. As we were preparing to go in, he's thinking, I'm going to tell him all these different things and all these angles. And I'm like, when you're communicating to this level of leadership, it's really best that you have about 5 slides. You just work those 5 slides. More than that, there's too much information. If you put too many more slides, you'll be hurried in your approach. So go with 5 slides, make them more heavily image driven, not too many words on the slides, and we'll use that process. And as you go in there, as we were talking ahead of time, I said, man, just put everything on one page. Just so as they're looking at the slide, they see the deck, it's moving across the screen in front of them. Just give them one page to see everything on. Now, everything that I just talked about, I'm teaching, I'm helping that individual on my team figure out ways to be more successful. And wouldn't you know, as I was actually coming to get to a place where I'm preaching today. I see an email from one of the senior leaders within our organization affirming this individual and saying, hey, this is a great process. It was a great program. It was a great communication that you laid out today. So it may not seem like a big deal, but I've just earned relationship. I've earned credibility. I've helped that individual take steps forward in the process. All right, so just to reiterate these points again. First one, we're going to eat with people. Second one is share stories with people. Third, bring them into our home. Fourth, we'll ask questions and listen to them. Listen to about what's going on in their life. Fifth, we want to help develop people, like me talking about the individual that I helped develop in his workplace, but then there are other places you can do that as well. But then here's the sixth, and this is a final habit that you've got to do no matter what. If you want to see people in your work world come closer to Christ, if you want to impact people with the gospel, then you need to speak the gospel. And I understand this can be a contentious space sometimes. We think, man, I can't share the gospel with people at work, and man, it'll be weird there. I just can't insert that conversation in. Actually, there are places and spaces. Maybe it's in a one-on-one conversation. Somebody's talking about challenges that are going on in their work, and you say, hey, can I pray for you? And they can say no to that process. You can go through that. There are spaces where you can say, well, let me tell you a little bit about my story, especially if you've heard their story. Maybe it's at a happy hour after work, or maybe it's a place in your home. Maybe it's on a trip somewhere. You have all kinds of opportunities and all kinds of spaces to share the gospel. I'd encourage you to do so respectfully, but talking about the creation of the world, talking about the fall of the world, talking about redemption, Jesus' work and what he did on the cross, and talking about the reconciliation that happens when we're in relationship with him. You get into the habit of talking about the gospel, people may feel like it's weird at first, but then they'll get to a place where they recognize that that is really meaningful to you. If you've asked questions, they've been a part of your life, they've seen into your world, you're building a relationship with them, there's a whole lot higher level of acceptance of you sharing that information. Now, maybe they won't accept the gospel the way that you want them to, when you want them to, but their receptivity and their openness to God and his activity is much more stronger when you spend time building trust and relating to him. Now, all of that, I just want to draw your attention to one thing. I heard that 9 to 5 when I heard this sermon series come out. And for those of you who are a little bit older, you may remember the year 1980. I don't remember that year. I mean, I was alive during that year, but I don't remember it. The song 9 to 5 actually became popular in 1980 because a movie came out called 9 to 5. The song was sung. If you hear it one time, you'll remember it forever. It is so distinct. But within the song, the singer Dolly Parton, she sings about working 9 to 5 and how it feels to go to work. And I want to read a couple lines out of this, read a chorus and read the verse out of this song, because I think it really does illustrate what the world around us looks like. Here's Dolly singing. I won't sing it. I'll just read it. Working 9 to 5. What a way to make a living. Barely getting by. It's all taking and no giving. They just use your mind and they never give you credit. It's enough to drive you crazy if you let it. 9 to 5 for service and devotion. You would think that I would deserve a fair promotion. Want to move ahead, but the boss man won't let you. I swear sometime that man is out to get me. And then the verse, they let you dream just to watch them shatter. You're just a step on the boss man's ladder. But you got dreams he'll never take away, in the same boat with a lot of friends, waiting for the day that your ship will come in, and the tide's going to turn, and it's all going to roll your way. This song, this idea of work, the people around us in our workplace, they want to know Christ. They want to know meaning. They want to know value. They want to know impact. They want to know what it's all about. And the reality is we have that answer. We know that. We have remedy for making workplaces better. We have remedy for making the world around us better. It really isn't a question of what our mission is. Our mission is to use our influence to step in spaces where others aren't, to share the gospel with people. We know we have a limited time on earth, 80 to 90 years, maybe 100 for a few of us. But then our time is done. And that space that we have, that 80 years, or as Chris shared with us last week, those 90,000 hours of work. God's called us on a mission, and he's asked us to use that time to help other people see him. So as you move forward this week, as you go out, my challenge to you is simply this. Wherever you are, whatever you're doing, whoever is around you, will you use your position? Will you use your space? Will you use your voice? Will you use your time? Would you use your house? Would you use your meals to invest in other people and help them come to know Christ? Thanks so much. Let me pray for you. God, I thank you so much that you have brought us into this world and you allow us to be a part of your mission. Lord, as people think about their work, as they think about their jobs, their place of business, as they think about what they want to do with the rest of their lives, Lord, I pray that they would not view for those who are in church vocation, their ministry world is the only way to do effective ministry. And for those who are in the workplace, the marketplace, the school, the educational systems, Lord, I pray that they wouldn't view their work and their space as non-spiritual, but they would see that you're working there in a significant and meaningful way. Lord, help us all to realize that you've called us to impact the world around us, and you can use anything at any time to draw someone close to you. God, thanks so much for loving us, and thank you for Christ. In his name we pray. Amen.